I still remember how 2015 felt before everything fractured, before silence stopped being comforting and started sounding like a threat. Back then, I genuinely believed I had finally gotten something right. I was 31, newly married, really trying, to be a calm, functional adult, instead of the constantly exhausted version of myself I'd been for years. My wife and I had met through a quiet, forgettable dating app. No filters, no bravado. Just two worn-down people who both admitted in their bios that we preferred still nights and honest conversations. That alone felt like fate. We dated for 3 years, took our time, fought like normal people, learned how to apologize instead of win, and eventually, we decided we wanted something that belonged only to us. Not a house, not a neighborhood, not noise. A cabin, somewhere far north, where cell service faded out and the air smelled like pine and water instead of exhaust and fried food. We found it through a private listing. No resort, no HOA, no shared docks. Just a small wooden cabin near a lake called Alder Hollow, surrounded by miles of wilderness most people never bothered to visit. The cabins were spaced so far apart, you couldn't see another one unless you tried. That was the appeal. When we signed the papers, my wife laughed and said, "Finally, a place where nobody can bother us." I wish I had understood how wrong that sentence was. That first weekend was supposed to be perfect. We left early Friday morning with groceries, fishing gear, blankets, and a bottle of cheap red wine we always pretended tasted better than it did. The drive took just over 4 hours. Highways narrowed into 2-lane roads. 2-lane roads turned into 1-lane stretches. Eventually, the pavement felt optional. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. Radio stations dissolved into static. Gas stations vanished. Even the trees grew thicker, leaning inward like they were listening. My wife smiled out the window. This is exactly what I needed. I agreed. No emails, no neighbors, no interruptions. The cabin was smaller than the photos suggested, but in a way that felt honest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a couch that had lived several lives before us. The front door faced the lake. The back of the cabin pressed up against trees so dense they swallowed light by mid-afternoon. The place smelled like old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, probably the water. We spent Friday fishing, cooking over the stove, laughing at how bad we were at relaxing. That night, rain tapped softly against the roof, and for the first time in months, my shoulders loosened. Around midnight, we turned off the lights and climbed into bed. That's when the knocking began. At first, it was gentle. 1 knock, then another. I stared at the ceiling, convincing myself it was a branch, wind, the quiet playing tricks on me. Then it came again, harder. My wife whispered, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," I said. Probably nothing. The third knock erased all doubt. Someone was at the front door. I checked my phone. No service. Of course. "Who would even know we're here?" she asked, already tense. "I don't know," I said, sitting up. "Stay here." The moment my feet touched the floor, the knocking exploded into violence. Not polite, not hesitant. Pounding, the kind that doesn't ask. Each hit rattled the frame, the sound ricocheting through the cabin like it had nowhere to escape. My heart slammed, but I forced myself to move slowly. Panic wouldn't help. The layout mattered now. From the bedroom, you couldn't see outside. The living room windows faced the lake. The front door sat just out of view. The only angle that gave a clear look was the small kitchen window. I didn't approach the door. I stayed low, bare feet, silent, against the floor. The pounding grew heavier as I moved, like whoever was outside could sense it. When I reached the kitchen window and lifted myself just enough to look, my breath stopped. A large man stood with his back to the glass, shoulders hunched as he slammed his fist into the door over and over. He was massive, well over 6 feet. Not gym-built, working man heavy. He wore a dark jacket and a hat pulled low, hiding his face. Every strike made the cabin shudder. I froze. My wife stepped into the living room behind me. I raised my hand, shaking my head. She stopped instantly. "What do we do?" she mouthed. I didn't have an answer. No weapons, no neighbors, no cell service. Just us and him. I made a mistake. I flipped on the porch light. The sudden glow washed over him, casting long shadows across the ground. He didn't flinch, didn't look around, didn't react. He just kept pounding. My stomach dropped. "That's not normal," my wife whispered. "No," I said, "it's not." We slid down beneath the window, pulling into the darkest corner, barely breathing, while the door absorbed blow after blow. My mind spiraled. Drugs, mental illness, someone who thought this cabin was theirs. Then it stopped. Silence rushed in so fast it made me dizzy. I listened, counted seconds. Nothing. Relief barely had time to settle before the sound started again. From the back of the cabin, not the door, the wall. Heavy impact slammed into the wooden siding, vibrating through the structure. Fists, shoulders, something solid, enough force to make the walls groan. "He's trying to get in," my wife whispered. The pounding moved slowly along the back wall, methodical, like he was testing the cabin, learning it. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence returned, thicker than before. We didn't move for an hour. Neither of us slept. Morning light made the world look safer, but the fear hadn't left. It had only gone quiet. Outside, the proof was everywhere. Deep gouges scarred the front door. The back wall was scuffed and dented. Plants were crushed flat. Footprints pressed deep into the dirt. "This really happened," my wife said softly. We talked ourselves into staying. Maybe it was a local trying to scare off newcomers. Maybe a warning. Maybe something that went too far. Saturday passed without incident. Too quiet. That night, we locked everything and went to bed early. At exactly midnight, the knocking returned. Slower this time. Measured. Each knock spaced out, like he knew we were awake. We didn't move, didn't speak, didn't turn on the lights. After 10 minutes, it stopped. Morning brought a piece of paper on the ground. 2 words, written thick and black. "Get out." We left immediately, filed a report. Nothing was ever found. No suspects, no explanation. We sold the cabin within months. Even now, years later, I never imagined my life would drag me back to that stretch of Nevada highway. But trauma leaves traces, little markers you don't notice until you're already following them. My name is Marika Hale, and before everything fell apart, I worked nights along Highway 95, just outside a forgotten desert town called Boulder Flats. Tourists never stopped there. Patrol cars rarely passed through, and the desert was wide enough to swallow screams without a trace. I didn't love the work, but I didn't hate myself for it either. Life backs you into corners, and survival teaches you not to ask why. It was late October when things started. Cold desert wind cutting through thin clothes. Neon motel signs buzzing and flickering like they were dying. That was when I first noticed the black SUV. It always parked across from the Silver Sage Motel, engine off, windows black. It never moved, even when I did. I told myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia doesn't leave evidence, and that night it did. After a long, rough shift, I unlocked room 12. Peeling wallpaper, ancient carpet, A Bible so old it looked fused to the nightstand. I locked the door, dropped my bag, and checked my reflection. Hollow eyes, smudged makeup, hair sticking to my mouth. Exhaustion stared back at me. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Don't look in the mirror. My body went cold all at once. I stared at the message, then slowly back at the mirror. It was just glass bolted to the wall, nothing else. Another vibration. Unknown number. She sees you. I stepped away from the mirror and grabbed my pepper spray. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I checked the peephole. Empty hallway. When I turned back toward the mirror, my reflection wasn't alone. A woman stood just behind me in the glass. Pale skin. Soaking wet hair clinging to her face. Eyes black and glossy like oil. I spun around. Nothing. My heart slammed against my ribs as I backed into the corner and dialed the front desk. Silver Sage Motel, the clerk answered. Did anyone come into my room earlier? I asked. No, ma'am. Staff left hours ago. Did anyone ask for room 12? A pause. Then, actually, yes, a woman. Said she was your sister. My chest tightened. I don't have a sister. She left a spare key. Said you'd locked yourself out. A metallic click sounded behind me. The spare key rattled in my door. Call the police, I whispered. The line went dead. Static filled my phone. Another message buzzed in. Unknown number. Don't call for help. She hates that. 3 slow knocks hit the door. Heavy, controlled. I crept to the peephole. A woman stood there, head bowed, wet hair hiding her face, clothes dripping like she'd crawled out of a river. Who are you? I whispered. She lifted her head. The peephole went black. Something pressed against it, breathing. The lights flickered. The room turned freezing. I ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and collapsed against the tub. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. The mirror. Don't let her out. The bathroom mirror fogged on its own. A handprint appeared. Too long, too thin. Then her face pressed from inside the glass. Lips unmoving as her voice whispered behind my ear. Let me in. I screamed and burst back into the main room. The mirror there was worse. My reflection was gone. She stood in its place. I ran. Outside, the black SUV waited. The driver's window rolled down. A man leaned out, mid-50s, graying beard, sheriff's badge catching the light. Ma'am, you all right? I pointed at my room. Room 12, he muttered. Again? Again? I gasped. You weren't told, he said quietly. A woman named Leah Granger disappeared here 3 years ago. Worked the same way you do. Found dead, lungs full of sand. The motel lights went out. Screaming echoed from my room. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't trust him. Then, unknown number. He killed her. Unknown number. Look at his hands. They were stained with wet sand. Sheriff, I whispered, why is there sand on your hands? He turned slowly, hollow eyes. Because she grabbed me, he said, wouldn't stop screaming. He lunged. I ran for the highway. He chased me past rusted pumps and broken machines, muttering, she won't let me forget. Then a mirror shattered behind us. Something stepped out wearing my face. You buried the wrong girl, it said. He fired. The bullets passed through her. She touched his chest. Sand poured from his mouth as he collapsed, drowning in dry earth. She turned to me, sadness in her eyes. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered, then vanished. The real police came later. They found everything. The bodies, the truth. I left Boulder Flats for good. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror, my reflection lags behind. And my phone still buzzes at night. Unknown number. Thank you. Because mirrors never forget. I can still remember the smell of that night with unsettling clarity. Cold air mixed with damp concrete and something metallic, like old coins pressed between your fingers too long. It's strange what fear chooses to preserve. Not dates, not forecasts, just the tightness in your chest that refuses to loosen, even months later. I've never been someone who scares easily. I grew up in a typical working-class American home where you learn early to lock your doors, mind your business, and never assume someone is harmless just because they smile. Still, I never imagined I'd be lying awake at night, straining to hear footsteps that might not even be real. Before everything happened, life was boring, in the best way. We lived in a small village just outside a mid-sized Midwestern town. The kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways, where the local Facebook page only ever talks about lost cats or garage sales. People move there for peace, for routine, for quiet. My parents had bought the house about 2 years earlier. It was a modest 2-story place with beige siding, a narrow porch, and a lawn my dad treated like sacred ground. I lived there with my mom, my dad, my younger brother, and my partner. It was crowded, sure, but it felt safe. There was always someone home. Always noise, always light. Right next door lived an old woman everyone called Mrs. Holloway, though that wasn't her real name. She'd been there longer than anyone else on the street. Thin, slightly hunched, gray hair pulled back so tight it made her face look permanently tense. She never smiled. Not at kids, not at dogs, not even when my parents once drove her home after her bus never showed. Her house looked normal enough. Same layout, same faded siding, but something about it always felt wrong. Like it swallowed sound, like it watched you back. She lived with her son, or at least that's what we thought. We weren't close neighbors, just polite nods. Quick hellos. That was it. Sometimes, though, we'd hear shouting from next door. A man's voice. Angry. Muffled. Maybe once every few weeks. We always brushed it off. Probably yelling at the TV, my dad would say. Or gaming, my brother joked once. We didn't think much of it. God, I wish we had. The night it happened began like any other weekday. Work, dinner, a little TV, phones glowing until our eyes burned. Around midnight, everyone drifted toward their rooms. I double-checked the locks like I always did. Front door, back door, deadbolt, chain. Some people call that paranoia. I call it staying alive. I had just climbed into bed when the house exploded with noise. Bang, bang, bang. Not knocking, not the doorbell. Pounding, violent enough to rattle the frame and send my heart straight into my throat. Our Jack Russell Milo went feral, barking and snarling, throwing himself toward the stairs like he was ready to attack whatever was down there. What the hell? My mom shouted from her room. My phone read 2:31 a.m. Nobody shows up at that hour for anything good. Another slam hit the door, harder this time. Gad, I yelled. My parents' bedroom door flew open. Footsteps thundered down the hall. My dad didn't hesitate, and that terrified me more than the knocking. I'm going down, he said. Don't open it, my mom whispered, panic cracking her voice. I'll just see who it is. I followed him to the top of the stairs, legs shaking so badly I had to grip the railing. Dad, please, I said. What if he has a knife? He didn't answer. The pounding stopped just as he reached the door. The silence felt wrong. Heavy. Then my dad opened it. I couldn't see the man clearly, but I heard his voice. Deep, rough, aggressive. What's your problem? The man snapped. My dad barely had time to react before the man stepped closer and repeated it, louder. Something shifted in my dad then. Pure instinct. He slammed the door shut so hard, the whole house shook. and locked it immediately. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. The pounding came back, faster, angrier. "Open the damn door," the man yelled. My mom grabbed her phone. My brother stood frozen, halfway down the stairs, pale as a ghost. I ran to my bedroom window and pulled the curtain back, just enough to see. Under the streetlight stood a tall man with broad shoulders, messy hair, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. He paced back and forth, shouting things I couldn't make out. Then he turned and walked straight next door. I watched as he hammered on Mrs. Holloway's door, screaming and swearing. A light flicked on inside. "If you don't stop, I'm calling the cops," someone shouted. The man cursed and disappeared behind the house. None of us slept that night. Every creak, every passing car, every gust of wind made my stomach drop. My partner slept through most of it, only waking when I stepped on him, trying to get a better view out the window. "Someone tried to break in," I whispered. His expression changed instantly. The next morning felt unreal. Birds chirped. Kids waited for the bus. The world carried on like nothing had happened. 2 days later, my partner and I were driving to work when police cars screamed past us, lights flashing. My gut sank. I texted my brother. "Everything okay at home?" No reply. By the time I reached work, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. They took him out, in cuffs. The message said, "It turned out Mrs. Holloway didn't have one son, but she had two. The man who pounded on our door had lived right next to us the entire time. Drugs, mental illness, nobody was sure." The police took him away, and for a moment, I felt relief. 2 days later, he was back. That's when I bought the Ring doorbell. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Then my mom spoke to a longtime neighbor. "Oh yeah," the woman said casually. "That's her son. He's always done that. The lady before you, same thing." My mom came home furious. We never got an apology. Never an explanation. And even now, months later, I still wake up some nights with my heart racing, convinced I hear pounding on the door. Because the scariest part wasn't a monster. It was a man. And he lived right next door.